Geography and You presents
Hello and welcome to Sagar Say, The Blue Deal, a GNY live podcast series where we chart the evolving seascape of India's blue economy. I'm your host, Hiteshika. In this episode, we turn our focus to a crisis that remains largely invisible yet threatens the very foundation of life along India's coastline saltwater intrusion. From dwindling freshwater reserves to saline farmlands and displaced communities, the phenomenon raises urgent questions about resilience and justice in the face of climate change and industrial expansion. To unpack this pressing issue, we are joined by Dr. Indira Khurana, a prominent voice on water and sanitation policy, and someone who has been at the forefront of advocating for coastal community rights and resilience. Guiding us through this critical conversation is Dr. Sulagna Chattopadhyay, Editor in Chief of Geography and You. She is also the founder of Saga think tank and a seasoned expert in ocean and polar affairs. Dr. Chattopadhyay has led several national and international conclaves shaping India's discourse on maritime and polar policy. Let's begin this vital conversation.
Thank you, Hiteshika, and a very warm welcome to Indira. We are delighted to have you with us. We are delighted to have you here with us in the GNY studio. Your work on water, it's exemplary. We are really honored.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Um, Indira, why are the oceans important? Really, we live on land. Should we be even worried? What is these so much talk about oceans?
So, I think oceans are really critical. They are important for our survival, for the survival of the planet. And if you see, 72 to 75% of the earth is covered with oceans and with seas, and they play a very critical role in providing oxygen. For the last 2 centuries, almost 50% of the oxygen that is there on the earth comes from oceans. And also importantly, almost 50% of the carbon that is there in the atmosphere is sequestered through the biodiversity that exists in the ocean. So it's really critical that we take care of ocean health. Yes, the oceans provide us as a source of economic activities to meet our energy transition goals, to shift from fuel based energy to non fuel based energy sources. But the oceans also have another role, very important critical role to play.
So basically, you're trying to say that resource outlook should not be the priority outlook. Ocean health is, according to you, a more critical need, really.
Yes, ocean health is really important, because let's also not forget that the oceans are responsible for our monsoon cycle, for our rain cycle. So it's because of the water that evaporates and the whole water cycle and the rain cycle that happens. So if you want to have a good life, if you want to have a good sustainable life where we are all living well and there's well-being around, the health of the oceans is critical.
Okay. Now, today we want to actually talk about a subset of all this,
Mhm.
probably a very focus area, like we can say. We want to talk about saltwater intrusions, really. So, first, I would like you to explain, like, what is saltwater, what is this intrusion in coastal areas? How does that happen? And, just give us a sense of that.
So we are blessed with a very long coastline. India, we have about a 7,500 kilometer long coastline, which is across I think 8 states and 4 union territories, and 14% of our population lives in these coastal states. Now, coastal state means it's on the coast and it's next to the sea, and through natural processes also there is a tendency for the seawater to come into the groundwater resources, groundwater aquifers, and these are kind of seasonal, and sometimes in the water the salt water will come in and then it will go back. It may happen when during a storm surge. But what is really important now and why this is increasing is also because of our over dependency on groundwater extraction. So there is a very well calculated formula which says, which tells you how much salt water can come into your coastal aquifers. So if your groundwater level is higher than the seawater, then it keeps the seawater at bay. But if you over extract your groundwater and this level goes below the seawater, then the seawater comes and creeps into the into the land. It creeps into your groundwater resources, making them saline. It affects the soil. It also affects the productivity of the soil. And given the kind of development that's happening in coastal areas, that is why there is an increase in the saltwater intrusion. And you'll be surprised to know that there is a study that is done globally, and they have shown that in many cities, coastal cities, the ground is subsiding. And this is not only because of sea level rise, but because of the over extraction of groundwater, leading to subsidence of the land and more saline water ingress.
That's, I mean, that's quite
It's
stark.
worrying.
Yeah,
Yes.
imagine if land is subsiding as well. We're talking about reclaiming land from sea also. So, and at the same time, if you're extracting water and leading to subsidence, then of course there is more cause of worry. Now, let me just shift a little bit to the draft blue economy policy, which of course you're aware of. The priority area 2, actually, we don't really have saltwater intrusion as a subject area in the blue economy. In fact, we don't even have disasters, we don't have climate, we don't have all of that also, which we'll discuss again a little later. But it doesn't talk about it directly, but it does talk about something called marine spatial planning. Does it account for the saltwater intrusion? What is marine spatial planning, and how do we use that?
So, simply put, I think marine spatial planning is about looking at the planning in the coastal areas where you plan for uh, economic activities, taking into account social issues, also ecological issues, and also economic activities. So, you do your planning in such a way so that all these factors are taken into account. So, theoretically, that's what should ideally be done. Whether that really happens on the ground is something that is a cause of concern. And I say this because if you look at, say, rural areas, or if you look at coastal areas in Odisha, for example, a large part of the state has got salinity ingress. Several kilometers of the coastline have been quote unquote swallowed by the sea. Villages have disappeared into the sea. Agricultural lands have been affected. So, when you're talking about marine spatial planning, are you factoring these things into whatever you are speaking when you speak about the planning? Even in the cities, these disasters that are happening, and there's ample evidence now which says that there is going to be an increase in the disasters. Some of which are due to natural causes, but several of those are also due to the development interventions that we have made. And a city like Delhi, for example, is a good example where even a small amount of rain, the streets are waterlogged. So I think if you're talking of marine spatial planning, there are a lot of more issues that need to be taken into account, especially the concerns and the effects the development is going to happen on marginalized and vulnerable communities, those that depend on fishing, or those that have agricultural fields next to the coast. So these things, these people and their concerns, their requirements also need to be taken into account if you want this to be successful.
Moving on, Indira, if we can just talk about, tell us a little bit about, say, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, Orissa. Now, these places seem to have more of a problem of saltwater intrusion as compared to, say, Goa. Now, why this difference? And, give us an idea why some places it's like, as far as we know, every place has some urbanization, they have cities, they have so many tourism, like especially Goa, it's like full of tourists. So why is there less saltwater intrusion in Goa while more in the Odisha is more village, communities are fisher people. So what is really happening?
So one difference I think is that the cities and the places in the eastern coastal part of India, they are more vulnerable as compared to the western coastal part. So, of course, Gujarat comes on the west coast. Also, the storms that happen in the Bay of Bengal are much more stronger, and there is now a lot of evidence which says that the sea level rise in Bay of Bengal is much more annual sea level rise as compared to the rest of the Indian Ocean. So there's a difference. The storms are more intense. The storm number is more in this area. It's also to do with the geography and the land and the geology of the land. So some are natural phenomena also that are happening, which is responsible for more water coming in or less water coming in. The other issue, like I mentioned, was the sand mining is an issue also, which affects which affects the salinity intrusion and which also affects the subsidence of the land. So is groundwater extraction. So as you have more and more infrastructure coming in, there is more and more demand. More and more demand for fresh water. So more and more groundwater extraction. So going, the decline in the level. So the seawater coming in. And Goa, I think, still has a lot of greenery. It also has a lot of mangroves, though there's a lot of tourism. But they're not those heavy. There's not those heavy structures. They're not big structures. They're like small. Mostly so far, there have been like a few big hotels, and then there are Airbnbs and there are shacks and they're small structures. So that footprint, I think, is not as big as it is in the other coastal areas, and of course the nature also plays a role. So all these reasons combined, I think, is the reason why certain areas are more strongly affected than others. Also, if we talk in terms of the people and the livelihoods, it also depends on what the states are doing. So is the state, is the civil society, other people taking care in one city, in one state and not in the other? That is an issue. What are the plans that are there in place to prevent these disasters or to reduce the intensity of these disasters? We are not talking of disaster response, but to prevent disasters. So that also plays a role. And also, are there other alternate livelihoods that some people are able to take? So if you have more education in a certain area or more opportunity, then you can take other livelihoods, so your livelihood will not be that affected. But the coastal region of India is under severe threat, and it's also under severe threat of erosion. And in fact, the Minister of State for this environment, climate change and forests, in Parliament, he has responded saying that 1/3 of the coasts of India is under serious threat of erosion, and Gujarat tops that list. So there is a concern, and they are saying they're doing coastal management strategy. How effective that is, and how it really will help the people who we are most concerned about, that is the most vulnerable, that is something that we need to see.
So the coastal communities, when you talk about coastal communities, are these fisher people? What kind of communities are you? I would specify. My thing is, I would like to look at fisher people communities and give us an idea, because they go out into like, sea is their livelihood, oceans are their livelihood. They don't have anything apart. So if they have to, for example, migrate, they have to move out of a certain area. Like erosion is a problem, fresh water is a problem. So if these are problems and they need to move out, then do they have, what would their livelihood be, because they have to depend on the sea?
So yes, fisher folk is the people who are affected the most, and there is some amount of agriculture also that happens, but fishing community is affected the most. And again, they are hit by various reasons. So one is the big, industrial ship fishing that happens, the big trawlers that come. Many people use, strong lights while fishing, which is actually banned, and that kind of blinds the fish, and they come to the surface, and that affects the fish population. Then the size of your nets in which they would use to catch the fish is now becoming smaller and smaller. Earlier, the net size, the lattice or whatever you call it, was little big, so that the small fish and fingerlings would not be caught, and they would have a chance to grow and reproduce and so on. But as the catch is declining, so then the nets are also becoming smaller and smaller. This, coupled with the other issues that are there, the storms that are there, and then other infrastructure coming in, so their livelihood is being curtailed. Now many of them don't have any other skills. They don't have any other things that they can do. So then they migrate to other places and work as labor. So largely it is a population that goes and works as labor in other cities and in other places. So they are uprooted from their place. Like I think they take to sea and swimming, and they know the ocean like the back of their hand. Like before they can even walk probably. But then they are uprooted from that place, and then they go to another place out of desperation. So that's kind of
So
unfortunate.
are we seeing movement like that? Are we seeing fisher people choosing other livelihoods and moving away from fishing? Really, is there anything that you have been able to
I've
see in
I've
your
spoken to
studies?
some in some villages in the coastal area of Puri of Odisha. I've spoken to some of them, and some have been actually they relocated.
Hmm.
They've relocated 2 or 3 times, and each times they have been affected. Like if you're moving, if you have given place and set up your house or your village in another place, the other place also should be willing to accept
Accept you,
you
yeah.
because they themselves have a challenge of limited resources. So multiple times people have shifted their home, and they will point to a hand pump in the middle of the sea, and they said that was where my land was. So
Oh,
you just, and then there is one photograph, and I've spoken to them, is like the hand pump and that pipe which you
goes
yank this, and
actually.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and which the water comes up. You can just see the pipe all the way up, like 10 feet up, and there's that handle on the top. So the rest of the land is gone. So it is difficult for them, and that is why certain activists are also advocating for a rehabilitation policy for people who are living in the coastal areas.
That's quite a stark revelation you had over there. It set an image. Um, so now, when we do and understand these problems, and we can kind of also to a certain level quantify it. Um, is there anything that you see in policy? Does it drive policy, or what is the framework? Do you see a framework coming about these communities, of course, protection, of course, a certain framework which is blue economy, the draft policy has some ideas, but do you see it reflecting it? Do you see the draft blue economy policy reflecting it?
I think a lot more needs to come into the policy if you're talking about the communities which are marginalized. We sometimes forget that they're also a very vital part of our economy. For example, the fisher community. They give you proteins. They help build your nutrition. They help. They are in sync with your cultural habits if you're living in a coastal area and your food habits. They don't get the recognition or the space in the policy on the policy table is, I think, one area that needs improvement. You need to have more people who are either direct representation of these communities so that you can understand what their problems is, and you can build your policy around those problems. I have tremendous faith in the wisdom of India. I think that there is no problem in India that cannot be solved. If we recognize it and we set our mind to it, I think that I refuse to believe that India has a problem that it cannot be solved. But we need to listen to this. We need to listen to them. We need to treat them with respect and see how best we can protect the interests while keeping the interest of the larger economy also in mind. We shouldn't forget that they're also vital contributors of GDP. They are responsible for decentralized economic activities. They feed into our health system while they themselves are completely affected. And the saline, I should have mentioned earlier, consuming saline water has a huge impact on the health of people. There is an increase in the kidney stones, increase in hypertension, skin problems, and when fresh water becomes really difficult to access, then it is the women and the children who are affected because they have to travel long distance to get that pot of water. So this is also something that affects their life, and it affects the life of women more. And in migration also, as you know, when people migrate, it is the women who suffer more than
Correct.
the men. They don't have even their safety is at risk. Their education suffers. Sometimes they don't get employment opportunities over there. Sometimes they're left behind taking care of the elders. So this it's not a situation that you want to be in. So I think definitely we need to hear those voices and plan our policies accordingly. And the second thing I think is we need to do is that practice should influence policy, and the policy should influence the practice. So if you put a policy in place, you need to go and see on the ground how well it's working, and it should be dynamic. So if it's not working in a particular place, see what why is it not working, what are the changes that you can make. So this is a circular feeding into each other, policy into practice and practice into policy, which kind of, I think, will help at least reduce the pain in these coastal areas.
Right. Would you then say this is a slow disaster? Or would you even categorize it as a disaster? Saltwater intrusion and then its impact on livelihood and then migration. Would you say that it was, building to be something of that kind?
I would, just like drought, which I think is an insidious, slow disaster. I think also this whole thing about salinity intrusion is also a disaster. It's slow. It doesn't make the kind of headlines that floods makes. No one is saying here that floods. No one is undermining the impact of floods. But floods like come and they go. It's like a huge disaster in a very short period of time. But things like drought and the salinity ingress, they creep in, they are slow, and they have multi-generational impact. Similar to floods also. Floods also have multi-generational impact, but we don't give it the recognition that it deserves. And I think that is something that we need to take into account, because if we are looking at a blue economy contributing to, say, double-digit figures in the GDP.
Yeah.
The other side,
So
the
that's-
impact of all
Yeah.
this.
So I wanted to bring you there because you did mention GDP, and I wanted to bring you there that we are talking about 2047 double digit from the oceans, from the blue economy. So what is this entire GDP? What is your take on these numbers that we are playing with?
So GDP is important, but it should not be the only thing that we should be running after, because if we do, to use a Hindi word, andhadhun extraction, it is going to have implications, right? There is a limit to how much Mother Earth and the oceans can bear. And if we just extract, then it's not going to be helping our GDP in the long run. So I think whatever we need to do, there's a lot of geopolitical shift that's happening in the world also right now. Big rush for these, these minerals, these rare earth minerals, and these minerals that are found in the deep ocean,
Seabed.
in the seabed. So we need to be careful how we use them, because and how we extract them, because it's not without implications. And when we talk of GDP, just having huge economy is not enough. It's important to see what have we achieved with those numbers. Has the quality of life of everybody improved? Is the wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, or is it more equitable? So I think, and are we in a state of well-being? Are we in peace? Do we feel secure? I have seen a picture, I think last week, of a woman in a village in Nasik district. I didn't think in 2025 I would need to see this, but the women are precariously balancing on one rope and going deep down into a well to get a pot of water, and she's got a big leaf, and she's using that to sift the water into her pot. So is this a state of well-being? No, this is not a state of well-being. So we need to look beyond these big numbers of the economy and see how can we have a more just, equitable, and dignified GDP growth. And there are examples that this is possible.
Indira, now I just want to take your closing comments. I want to know that, there is so much happening. The coastal communities are under such a lot of stress, and that there is a lot of evidence of saltwater intrusion, and the fact that there are health concerns related to all of this. And of course, you mentioned that we don't really find it as headlines in mainstream media. So where do we go from here? I mean, what is it? What is the way forward, really?
So I think right now, if you see the way the world is going, and if you see the geopolitics, and you see the power that is there with business houses globally, and I think it's evident globally that they now have a lot more power than they did before. And I think this power increased after during and after the pandemic. So that is one situation that we need to be. I think we need to be aware of. We must be aware of, and I think many of us are aware of that. But on the other hand, I think the question is that, okay, what is it that we can do? So when when the world is in a particular scenario, there are two things you can do. One is you can like agitate, and the other you can do constructive, quote unquote, constructive work, or positive work on the ground. So I think it's important that this also goes ahead, that you look at some solutions, some things that are possible on the ground. You experiment with that, you learn from that, and if that is possible, then you see how you can share. I don't like to use the word scaling up, because then it's just like multiplying into 10. That doesn't happen, because everybody is different, localities are different. You're a geography person, so you would know between two wells also,
Yeah.
salinity level difference is different in the same area. So I think these experiments are very important, and here is where the role of communities and the role of civil society organizations come in. And I would like to give you an example of an organization where I'm a chair, though that's not a civil society organization. It's a Section 25 company. Name is Coastal Salinity Prevention Cell. It works in several districts in coastal districts in Gujarat, precisely to address this problem of coastal salinity. So their main programs are around water resource management, livelihood generation, around water sanitation hygiene, menstrual hygiene, and around education. They also work in Dwarka Dev Bhumi and also in Daman and Diu. So their programs, through their water conservation programs itself, they've harvested like billions of liters of water, and that has increased the agriculture, the area under agriculture and the agricultural productivity. This you can see even using remote sensing imaging. You can see the increase that has happened in the agricultural area, the greenery that has increased. So this is that's the evidence you can get from your eye in the sky. Also, they have done monitoring of certain wells with this water conservation effort through check dams, through farm ponds, through well recharge and other different water conservation methods. The salinity level of several of the wells has gone down, so the water quality has improved. So, and they are working with 25,000 farmers who have formed farmer producer companies also. So, there are certain groups that are working on this. It is important, and I'm sure in other coastal states also there is work that is happening. But there is a need now for all these groups to come together and to actually learn from each other, to amplify their own voice, so that the concerns are addressed at the policy level, and at not only at national level but even at international level, because coastal communities are a threat the world over, and the country may be different, the boundary may be different, but the problems are the same and the solutions are on the same principles. So I think we need to focus. Also, sometimes I also feel very, I feel disheartened
Demotivated.
and demotivated, like what's happening, and things are not right. But then the question is, what am I doing about this? So in my little space, what is it that I can do? Yeah, what I can do to make a difference through whatever skills I have. I think that's what we should be working.
That's really inspiring. Thank you, Indira. It was great speaking with you today, and we hope to put out a blog with your conversation, and we would like you to also go through it and perhaps have a look and add some data. And thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you. Thanks to your team.
Thank you, Dr. Indira Khurana and Dr. Chattopadhyay, for leading us through such an insightful and necessary conversation. Today's episode reminds us that beneath the surface of the blue economy lies a complex terrain of salt sucked into the soil from the oceans, of shrinking freshwater tables, and of communities responding. As we conclude, let us remember a sustainable Blue Deal must not only harness the ocean's potential but also protect its people. If you found today's conversation meaningful, don't forget to follow us and share this episode. We are on Spotify, Instagram, and YouTube. A detailed blog of this podcast episode will be soon uploaded on www.geographynu.com with all the reference links and additional sources. Thank you for listening to Sagar Say, the Blue Deal. Stay with us as we continue to explore the waves of science, policy, and community action shaping our maritime future. Until next time, let's keep the tide turning toward equity and sustainability.